Hello and welcome to another episode of the Captain's Table. My name is Paul Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender here at the AstroPub, your space bar at the end of the universe. This is the Captain's Table, one of the oldest Star Citizen podcasts that's still around. We started back in 2016. And we talk about Star Citizen, talk about news, we do some theory crafting, we talk about major events, all sorts of things. And today we've got a very special episode with somebody who I'm sure many of you remember, maybe not fully know. And then we also have, Red.
Just me.
Just Red. Anyways, before we get started, though, let's introduce everybody. I'll start off with you, Mr. Noobifier. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen, and where can they find you?
Hello, everyone. It's a Noobifier, basically mostly on YouTube. I do plan on stream once Squadron 42 comes out, if, 2 years, still waiting. Yeah. But anyways, I've been a little bit distracted lately, but I'm still tracking, and I still greatly like and love the whole idea of Star Citizen. You want me to be quick? Okay, I'll be quick.
You're good.
Basically, selling a house, buying a house, doing all that stuff. And we'll see you at CitizenCon.
You're going to CitizenCon?
Yes.
Awesome.
Paul was supposed to be going.
I was, and then my tooth exploded. Red Monster, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm Red Monster SC. I am an industrial focused player doing mining, salvage, and we'll get into exploration and base building when we get official gameplay for that. I run the Red Legion org and also do some race commentary. But you can find me on YouTube and Twitch just under the Red Monster SC handle. So
awesome. And last but not least, we have Mr. Radar Ranger. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
So I am just a certified Star Citizen geek. Been around for a while, been a backer since 2012. I'm CEO of a company called My Radar. It's a popular weather app here in the States. But the Star Citizen tie-in is that back in 2017, we did a little technology demo where we took the planets from Stanton and we made them so that you could see them in the app. And it was kind of a neat little experiment. It was a lot of fun. It was this little side collaboration we did with CIG back in the day. I actually presented at 2017 CitizenCon. So if you want to go Google it, look it up on YouTube, you can see me and get a little bit more detail about what I did there. But I've just stayed involved in the game because I'm really into it. I dig it. I can't wait for it to come out. You can find me on Twitter with a handle of A Green. Nice and simple. I was one of the OGs from Twitter, X, back in the day in 2008.
We still call it Twitter.
It's still Twitter.
It's still called Twitter.
Hard habit to break.
Yeah. All right. So the topic for today is actually brought up by Andy, who brought this up originally when I was just like, that's really neat. And I really think it's a good idea, which is organizations. It's an old idea that's gone back for many years. For those of you who don't know, especially if you're newer to the Star Citizen community, there is organizations as a major part that's supposed to take place where you can join orgs, which are kind of like clans or guilds in other games, where you can get people together and do things. And there's been some updates over the years for it. Like there's its own org Spectrum posts now with new Spectrum stuff. But the actual scope of orgs was supposed to be much larger from when they originally started to discuss that. And since, I would say, 2017, 2018, they've really kind of slowed down to just not even talking about organizations anymore. So we want to talk a little bit about organizations, but also just generally group gameplay in Star Citizen. We'll start off with the just current status of it. So, Andy, since you're the last person to introduce yourself, in your experience, what do you think is the kind of the good and bads of the current group gameplay and org stuff for Star Citizen?
Well, honestly, at the moment, I think that CIG is kind of selling the game short on it. That's my current stance. For whatever reason, they haven't exposed more of the organizational stuff in the game to everybody. They may have their reasons just because of the development cycle or something along those lines. They have party group ups, which are nice, but those are typically event driven. But I could definitely go long-winded on this one for a while. But the issue for me is org gameplay, especially if you look at other MMOs, it's one of the driving factors behind player-generated content. So in other words, the missions are out there that CIG creates for everybody. And those are awesome for the people who are just tipping their feet into the water of the game and want to play solo. Those kind of have to be there by default. But when you have player orgs in the game, there's this whole new universe of, pardon the pun, a whole new dimension of gameplay, player-generated content that's much more engaging, it's much more long-lived, and it self-perpetuates. It's something that kind of takes care of itself. So the party stuff that they have is kind of neat. They have the organizational tools on the website, but that to me is almost, the shame part of it. You have these features that they developed in Spectrum so that you can create orgs and have ranks and private message boards and everything, but there's nothing that exposes that in the game, and that's a bit of a bummer. Like I said, I'm sure they have, reasons for not having it in the game yet, just because there's been other priorities, but I think now is the time to start thinking about it, and I'm sure the whys on that will come up a bazillion times during this conversation. But that's my thoughts so far on it.
Yes. So let's continue going where we were before. Let's start from the beginning. We had a little bit of a disturbance there. If it goes down again, I'm probably gonna not have the YouTube up there. Sorry for those of you on YouTube, but just because this is this is the second time it's gone down. So
yeah,
but. Change this. Okay, so Red Monster, your thoughts on the current party system and the org system as it stands?
Yeah, as I was saying, the org system, it's competing with tools like Discord and Guilded that have really great collaboration spaces, and I think Spectrum kind of lags behind that. There's the talk of like org 2.0, bringing in more features and things. Those are all like they've been talked about for ages, and it's just the big question is when. And they do have to compete against systems like Discord and Guilded that a lot of orgs are using primarily to coordinate themselves. I myself, we have a weekly group mining session with the org, and we're using both our Discord server. We have a dedicated tool that we use for our mining and refining, scouting and such. But then also we're using one of the in-game features to create a custom channel. So like a general channel or a party chat, you can go and create a custom one and invite people to that. And we just name it after our org. But you can add people in there. It acts like a party chat that persists across sessions. So it wipes out every patch, but you can go get the same group of people in if you're an org, or just have a group of friends that always end up doing the same thing. You can send party invites from there once you get a party started, and it does pretty well.
I've heard about that one before. I think we've used that in the past, but I didn't know if
which one, Guilded?
No, so there's like a chat you can start in game where you can set up a chat.
Oh yeah,
and then it'll persist throughout sessions. That chat will always be there as long as you have people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So.
So that's my experience with it, at least.
Okay. Nubifier, your thoughts on the current party system and the current organization system as it stands in game?
So my story started 2017. I went and visited with Benoit, and this is right around Faceware, and everyone was all hot and horny to get Orgs 2.0 going and all this other stuff. And yeah, we got Faceware, and then the camera didn't release, and then we're still waiting for org stuff. And I'm not trying to sound negative, but it's an MMO, and everyone's already said it on the panel. We need it more now than, especially now, if they're going to go to 1,000 player servers, and we're on the cusp of getting large parties together, then we need all of the back end for party. And I know that's obvious. That's why we're talking about it, right? Mm-hmm. But we need stuff like org inter-economy, where I can give money to someone for stuff. We need to be able to have org pools of money so that the org itself can have things that it wants to achieve and have the ability to do it on behalf of the players that are there. Motor pool. I have ships, Andy has ships, and just to be able to throw them in a motor pool and give people access to it. It's all very simple seeming stuff, but we already know that with Star Citizen, it's not simple, and it's not like I'm saying, oh, just do it, But having the ability to open up Spectrum and just see where everyone is on the ARC map, remember that ARC map from 2015? It's like the thing. Again, these are all things that you'd take for granted in most other games, and I know it's still alpha, all that, but we need to light a fire on this, especially if people are polishing Squadron 42 and being shuffled somewhere else. This is now's the time.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, I think we'll kind of talk about more into like why this is super important here in a moment. But my experience with the org system is that, or the party system, it works. Kind of. It has a lot of problems, but it definitely it's always felt like a placeholder. It's always felt like they wanted to get this in so that people could have parties, but it's never been something that they are super like detailed with.
If I might, if anyone remembers playing before the current version of it, wow, that was paradigm shift for playability. That was really, really good. But again, not to sound like I'm not appreciative, we need more. We need that.
The UI update was great. Like the UI update they've made for this friend system, which wasn't that far long ago. It was only a couple of years ago, I think. Probably like 2023 or 2022. It wasn't last year. It was definitely like 2022 or 2021, but it was in the COVID era. That was a huge update. That was great, but that was more of a UX or a UI thing. It was a user interface thing, not really a like the problem with the current system is that you still have the labels disappear. There's still too much clutter at times. It's still unreliable because the only way you can add a friend if they're not in your session that's reliable to add a friend is to get out of the session, add them in the UI, the new UI they have in the front end, which works great. And then like invite them afterwards. So unless they're in your game right there, you can't either add them as a friend or invite them to a party. So that can be bad. And it's also still very clunky. There's like the org or like kind of party chat is still kind of not really there. There definitely needs to be more improvements there. And then the org system is it's a website feature. And I'm a lore guy. I like the lore. I do lore videos, but I'm one of those, I understand the kind of opinion, and I kind of share this opinion, which is if it's on the website, it's not the game. And an org system on the website is great, but it's not the game. I want the org system in game so I can actually use it for game purposes. And there's so many other things that are out there. And I think that's the kind of the problem right now is that it feels very, we'll deal with it at some point kind of situation. Like it's not a priority for them right now, which
I feel like it might be pretty soon. And I kind of go into that a little bit.
We're going to get into that because the thing is the reality is that, why would this be important? Why is the org system and why is the a party system? Why would these be important for CIG to invest time and effort in now? And I'll start with you on this one, Noobifier, to answer that question.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Why would it be important to have the party system and the organization system in now? Why should CIG invest time and effort into it?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Again, the whole point of the game is to get people together and play, right? Like so any time you make that easier, the game is already becoming work. And that's fine. That's what it's supposed to be. It's a simulator. So anything that you can do to allow people to come together sooner, better, with prepared, ready to go, so that they're not off moving ships and doing all this other stuff. Any planning tools so that I know exactly what time I have to be where with what. These are critical, and it sounds obvious. And this is kind of why, again, the conversation is coming up now because we're getting to the point where many people are going to want to start to play again. As soon as that server meshing 1,000-person thing comes on, I know there are people that have been asking me, it's like they haven't played in like 7 years because the last time they played it was just Stanton by itself, like Port Olisar. And they're like, is it time? And I'm like, that depends. Is it time for you? Probably not, but it's time. You should play. but it's going to become where I'm going to start to recommend that now is the time to those people. So if they come here and there's nothing for org management and stuff like that, or we're using like Google Sheets and, TeamSpeak, then that's, dumb. Sorry, guys, but
It's fine.
it needs to get addressed.
Red Monster.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. We're looking at 1,000-player servers. There are very few orgs that can boast that number of players, and we're going to have big opportunities to go through with large-scale group events. And I think we need those collaboration tools so that not only can some of those experienced players, but even like the newer players that don't know what they're doing, they don't have to come in and fight with the logistical challenges of just rendezvousing with their group. Get them in with, a dedicated org type chat, get the approvals in there, party like org applications just being on the website. There's no notifications or anything, right? It's something people have to actively manage, and that's somewhat limited. I think as we get into I do think we're kind of in the final stages of kind of the MMO development. We're talking about Squadron 42 coming out and the interest that's going to drive. You're going to get a lot of people in here that want to have a polished organization experience to start to pair that with Squadron 42, right? Come over and try the persistent universe. But those people are going to be turned off by the game that exists if there are not easy collaboration tools that they don't have to go outside for. Because there's some people who just swear against using Discord ever, right? Swear against using any other application. If it's not in the game, they're not going to be able to use it. So it's kind of catering to maybe a minority there, but also things need to be accessible within the game. I shouldn't have to alt-tab away in order to manage those types of things.
Okay. Andy, same with you. Why should this be a priority for CIG, both org tools and better party tools?
Yeah, I think honestly these two guys kind of hit the nail on the head. Really, the way I look at it, there's kind of three aspects to this whole thing. From the top perspective, the broader perspective, it's clearly just a smart idea to have a way for groups of players to get together and play for a common cause. That's kind of why almost every MMO out there has some form of player organization or guild or something along those lines, some kind of tool to facilitate that group gameplay. There's also the practical reasons, and so this is sort of the aspect that I think might be pushing CIG to start at least looking at this sooner than later, because they're coming out with a lot of really good multi-crew ships and bases. They're going to have to contend with the notion of permissions. Not everybody is going to have want to be the sole controller of their ship. They want to be able to designate people who are capable of taking command of it, or running the engineering station, things like that. They've already discussed that and they've talked about it in the past, but I think now that they're finally getting engineering and multi-crew gameplay in there, it's like the next logical step. The third aspect of this, and to me, this is, I think, the most important part, and it should be for CIG too. I touched on it at the very beginning, the player-generated content aspect. I mentioned this before, and I'm just going to kind of expand on it a little bit now. Again, every MMO has to have a basic mission system, because that's what gives people the introduction to the game, lets solo players kind of test their feet in the water and see how the universe looks and how it works. But that is typically finite. And at some point, people, if they really do enjoy the game and they want to stay in it longer, they look for something that's going to help them connect and reach out and participate. Instead of being, this person sitting on the sidelines of the universe, they want to get engaged and kind of play with everybody else. And that's what the guild system is all about. The mission systems are good, but those require labor and effort from the studio to put them together. And again, they're limited, they're finite. They can keep creating missions, but that's a labor intensive aspect. If you facilitate player generated content with the right tools, expose the right features in the game to see, for example, what org is somebody in when you scan them, have a base that you can fly a flag over that has a base, an org's identifier or something along those lines. You start to build this tribalism in the game, so that you create this conflict that is a driving force behind a lot of the activity in a lot of MMOs. And even as a solo player, you don't have to engage with that if you don't want to. If you want to kind of still stay on the sidelines and do your own thing, you're still more than welcome to. But Again, I'll go on for hours about this, but there's plenty of other MMOs to kind of draw from to see. And Eve is the one that first comes to mind when you have such a really good, ingrained, rooted, well-developed foundation for player orgs in the game. That's why Eve is still around. That player-generated content has been the stuff of, media legend. There have been real-world articles written about the efforts and money spent in some of the wars in EVE Online, and there's a reason for it. It's mostly because they have that player-generated content that evolves from player organizations.
I will answer this question by giving my own an analogy. I was an early adopter of WoW, and I played. It was only a couple months after it first released, and I remember playing it and enjoying it. But once I reached level like 25 to 30 in original vanilla WoW, I stopped playing. And the reason why was because I never joined a guild. I never joined another group. I didn't have any friends who played. It was just some people said, hey, you should try this out. So I said, oh, why not? I'll try it. And I just dropped out. And from everyone I've talked to who has really good WoW experiences or good MMO experiences in general, it's because they had either friends or like a guild or a clan that they played with all the time. And that was their experience, and their enjoyment was not just playing with friends, or not just playing the game in groups, but playing with friends in the group. Yeah. And that a lot of those groups ended up going off to beyond that game to multiple other games as well. So
that's where I've had most of the fun and most of the best memorable experiences is playing with guild members. My brother, Vinny, is 10 years older than I am, and he still plays WoW.
Yeah.
Because of the guilds that kind of help keeping things moving along.
And like, I enjoy Star Citizen solo, but it's clear that CIG is also trying to make sure that Star Citizen is an MMO. They talk about it all the time in terms of their balancing, in terms of their mission design. They want to make an MMO, and they really are dedicated to Star Citizen becoming more of an MMO than it is now. And the problem is that every MMO starts with a system like a guild or a clan system.
Yeah.
And that just is not there right now.
I think CIG recognized how useful it was at the very beginning, because that's why they made it through Spectrum.
Yeah.
That was a way to get people engaged and grouped together before they could really have any real practical use of it. But now they got to deliver. That's kind of my view. They're at that stage where they got to at least start thinking about it and have a plan for it.
Yeah.
Maybe they do. Maybe they're going to show it to us in October.
But and that's my hope, because right now it's key that, like, now that 4.0 has been in some stretch of completion, it's clear that CIG wants to get it out before the end of the year. If whether that happens or not, it's completely superfluous, because the point is that CIG is moving beyond 4.0. They're talking about 1.0 and what's going to be coming. So if you're going to be talking about 1.0, this is one of those things where, because I think the important thing for people to kind of come to understand is that right now, getting from point A to point B, if you have a friend who's in Hurston and you're in Microtech, it's a couple of minutes. It's not that long of a travel. It's not really that expensive. At most, it's going to cost you a couple hundred UEC to do so. So you can just kind of hop in and hang out with your friends. But Pyro could be minutes or hours away, plus resource management. And then when you start adding Nyx and, Castra,
you might not even be able to navigate it by yourself.
Exactly. Like you're once you start expanding the universe with the way CIG wants to expand, you're going to start running into a problem of just being able to reach people is going to be a logistical feat. And you still want to balance the idea of having being able to play with your friends with the space is big and travel should be important and logistical change should be important. And right now, based off of, because as Jared famously said, if we're talking about it, we're working on it. CIG ain't talking about this in any way, shape, or form. And so to me, that means they're not working on it. And I think that's not a good idea, because even just with Pyro being added, it's going to start becoming more and more clear that being able to just hang out with your friends in Star Citizen is going to become a labor. And that's part of what it's supposed to be, but there still needs to be the ability to just be able to find out where your friends are and meet up with them. And that's why the system needs to kind of come into them.
You know, a case in point in that is Elite Dangerous. I got into that over 10 years ago because they were one of the first ones to support VR. And I had a blast with it. You know, it was really cool, very immersive to be able to sit there in VR and play a space game like that. But one of the biggest problems I had with it was that there was no org features exposed in the game at all. So they had this big, huge universe. They even had the concept of like group goals and things like that. But they had no way to foster player interaction. You know, they had no way to get people together to provide the tools so they could do that in the game. And it was like, to me, it was, if you ask me, I would bet that is probably one of the biggest reasons why Elite failed. Because they did not have the forethought to plan ahead and have that there so that when the studio generated content was done and used up, they didn't have anything that could kind of grow on its own with player generated content. I really believe that's the case because you look at Eve. Eve is less sophisticated. Okay, Eve is less graphically sophisticated than Elite Dangerous was. But again, you know, because they've got this really intensive org structure, I think that is what's kept it fueled for so long.
Yeah, I would argue that Elite hasn't failed. I would say that Elite has not reached its potential for many reasons. But
and maybe I'm being a bit too harsh, but it definitely it's fallen by the wayside, and it you're right. I think that's a good way to put it. It hasn't reached its potential because it had so much to offer.
There's an argument that Elite is floundering a bit. And I always bring it up because there's a lot of people who still play Elite in my chat, and they always like to say, you know, they play Elite and they enjoy it, and Elite has still got a big community. It's just, I think that that's definitely something that's holding Elite back is that like sort of the ability to, because you don't see it in the zeitgeist like you see even Eve in the zeitgeist still.
Yes, there's no broader purpose other than running around and doing mundane missions and things like that.
The grind. And basically, as soon as they announced the console support was going to be stopping, that's probably where people got the impression like, oh, the game is dead. You know?
So what should CIG focus on in the near term? If we're saying that this is important and this should be done, what should CIG be focusing on to give this sort of support in the short term? And if you have examples of other games that do well on this, please let me know. And I'll start with you on that one there, Andy.
I've got two easy wins for this. Okay. First one is expose organizational information in the game, so that if I'm a player org and I see another ship that's in my player org, they get color coded a certain way or something along those lines. Something to at least reflect that org ownership in the game. The other easy win is while they're conceptualizing and engineering the functionality for permissions in a ship. I know they've mentioned it before. They've talked about it. They know it's something that they need to come out with. It should revolve around orgs, you know, and I think that's a no-brainer for them. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. But so, you know, they've mentioned in the past that I forget what his name is, one of the guys from Europe, but he mentioned specifically that they wanted to be able to give permissions to a screen so that when you logged into a monitor, you had access to, say, maybe just engineering and the weapons or something along those lines. If they're already thinking along that path, they'd be crazy to not be thinking to structure it in some way around orgs, player orgs, because that's like, you know, it's already the root foundation of what they'd want to build it from. And what's good about that is they're easy wins because they already need it for the multiplayer gameplay. And with regard to showing player orgs in the game, I would think, you know, unless I'm being a little bit too naive here, it's really just a matter of exposing a couple fields in the UI. So like if you do a scan, for example, they probably have to figure out a good way to work it into the gameplay so that it's realistic, you know. But if you do a scan of a ship, it should show what org they're in, you know. No brainer. Those are kind of easiest things to pull off.
I'm sure they have that information even in the game. I don't know, because I believe a lot of the social systems are linked already. So
I've never seen a single reference to org stuff in the game, though.
No,
and maybe I'm just blind on it. But
no, but the I believe Spectrum, the same servers that host Spectrum are the ones that host the VoIP system, for instance.
Yeah.
So I think Spectrum in some way, shape, or form is connected to the back end, the hybrid service. I could be wrong on that one.
Well, I know from a raw tools perspective, I know they were very specifically at one point talking about making it so that Spectrum from the web page was actually the same chat as in the game. So you could literally be in the web page and chat with somebody who's in the game. That would be cool. I don't, I'm certainly not the most active game player in the world, but I don't know if I've seen that before, where you could interact with the game servers from a web page. I think that would be a good way to tie in people who might not be present in the game, be able to reach out into the real world and potentially lure people in. Hey, we're at this base and we're getting attacked. Come join us, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Red Monster, same question for you. What would any suggestions you'd give to CIG? What should CIG be focusing on in the short term to improve?
I think in the short term, it starts with user permissions and access, right? Giving org members maybe different tiers of access depending on their rankings. Having shared resources, so having an org bank, that kind of hangar that's accessible. But defining at some point, right now we have like five ranks that we can do on the official org site. Give us a little bit more granularity. Let us put in divisions and ranks within divisions, especially for the larger orgs that are going to need that. Make that an option at least. But then have it provided with a tiered trust system. So anybody in my org can go and contribute to the org bank, right? And I should be able to see a history of their interactions and stuff. Higher senior level members can go and approve requests for org funds. Anybody can go submit one, but it has to be approved. And then certain levels, you can set a threshold. So somebody can't just go request 10 million credits if it's their first day in the org, right? But giving those types of tools, both for resource sharing, that could be in credits, that could be in inventories, that could be in ship access. And then, kind of defining those permissions within the org so that certain people can be qualified as laser operators or combat pilots. Giving those types of modifiers that could give them, say, okay, you're not allowed to take out one of the org moles unless you've already qualified as a laser operator, that type of thing. That would be, I think, long term, but at least in the short term, giving permissions, getting some type of resource shared. And, we've seen some of the org leaderboards for arena commander stuff, but I really think bringing more exposure to the org contributions in community events would be big. We get those that are generated by the marketing team after the fact, but kind of having those live updating, hey, this org, they're top as far as the resource gathering groups, and this org has the most bounty kills, and this org has the most crime stats earned. Getting
leaderboard,
those types of comparisons.
Yeah,
and maybe bringing it in to have some conflict, some competition within those groups.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think I'm a big fan of line go up gameplay. It's you give players a line to see or some sort of boast. They will do what they can to get that boast up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that encourage engagement. And if you have engagement, then you have people who are more motivated to log in and play. And that more motivation to log in and play means that they have more chances to play with their friends, which means they have more chances to have a good time, which then that means that they'll want to log in more and be more active. Because I've got plenty of times when I've been I could play Star Citizen, or I could play Space Marine. I could play Star Citizen, or I could play BattleTech for the fourth time. And it's well, I can play BattleTech and log in and log out and not have to worry about it. It's going to take me 3 hours to get through a mission in Star Citizen. So that's sort of incentive to be hey, come on and play because this is going to go on is always a good idea. I like that. Noob, short term, what do you think CIG should be focusing on to improve this situation?
Okay, so before we get into that, one of my ideas is maybe the why of the holdup, why it's being held up, is I know that they plan to do the ability to have NPCs that you can hire and control.
Yeah.
So the permission system will need to incorporate that component of it as
non-player
well.
characters.
I hope they're not holding back on what we need now just because they need to theory craft what the robots are going to need, because it could be the same system and you can plan for it. So that was just kind of an aside that I had as far as that's concerned. Basically, we already have a decent way of getting together, like party up and stuff like that. But now that we have the hangars, having an org hangar, a specific place where you can go hang out in the org, like a lounge, I think it was mentioned before already, is a great idea. I could keep like a 4 SCU box there that has all my shit in it. And if Andy needs something like a gun, he can say, hey, can you give me the code for the box? And it opens and you can just take whatever he wants from it. That becomes kind of a marketplace where you could abuse it, right? Like, but the game's going to have abuse anyways. And I really don't see how they're going to, like all MMOs people have found a way. So maybe a transaction limit, or maybe I just say, like $1,000 a day is what Andy can take out in equivalent kit. That was one of the ideas, but the commonplace, the org hangout is critical. I know people that'll just sit there waiting for someone to join and say, hey, what are you doing? But unless you're in the game waiting or screwing around, you could be screwing around with your loadout or something like that in your spare time, but in game. Anyways, I'm going to go the opposite way with that. We also need the ability to plan in a browser, not necessarily offline, but out of game. So
I agree.
I could say like a org quick mission creator, or like Nubifier is going to go from point A to point B. So start place, end place, start time, what we're doing, what we need, who needs to be there, what type of people I'm looking for. And then you just go add turret gunner. That's where I would like to help you.
Yeah.
And I don't have to, like maybe there's an email that gets sent out, a reminder, hey, by the way, Bozo, you need to be in point A to point B in the next 30 minutes or whatever. But with that, also having the ability to prepare your cargo elevator, like I know that it's a big ask, right? We already have like the inventory GUI, and basically copy paste what you can see in that GUI into a web browser. So I know that productivity at work is going to go down because people are going to be shuffling kit around.
Guilty.
And it's not like, it's not going to take away from the people that want to move boxes. Okay. But for people that simply, like the doctors and lawyers that have 2 hours to play, the game is not going to, it's not going to help. So you're going to spend 2 hours shuffling boxes and you're going to miss the game. It's not going to be fun. So possibly load the cargo elevator with what you want so that at least you can get there and do that, call up your ship, or even maybe being able to auto load what you want from the elevator into the ship so that you can arrive. And it's going to have a time sink and a money sink and all that stuff. That's one way to transact it. But again, it's about trying to minimize the absolute mundane minutia that a lot of people, and I'm not saying that like everyone who signed up for Star Citizen knows it's a simulator and knows its work, and we love it for that. But it's going to prevent
Friction.
some people from being able to play.
We need to lower the friction of people
Yeah, and I want everyone to play because I don't want to have a server with 4 people on it, and 30,000 bots. That's stupid.
Yeah.
And to be clear, because chat is just like, well, we need all these other things for that. It's like, yeah, we're talking about, because the thing is that because I don't think I would kind of emphasize this. For those who don't know, this isn't going to be something that CIG can just pull out of their butt. They need to like plan, and they need to actually start putting resources into it. They need to write a document about it. They need to make sure everyone's on board. And that takes minimum 6 months, 6 to 9 months, if not a year, to do something like this.
Well, I can say they have a leg up though, because they laid the groundwork for it. They were very smart in creating Spectrum, because that is the tie-in between the game and the other functionality on the website. If they can add exactly what Noob was talking about, where you can set up a lot of this stuff ahead of time and take some of that management stuff out of the game, or make it easier to perform in a web browser, then the only thing that you need left is a mobile app that ties that together. But that is a subject for another story.
I don't even need that yet, though. I understand. I want it.
Yes.
I would love it, and we need it.
I
am
agree.
being a realist that it needs to work like
I agree.
it works in game now. Just to get it out of the game into a web browser, like you can sit at your iOS computer, your IBM computer,
Organize.
your Windows computer, and do it. That would be it. I just totally dated myself, didn't I?
The only reason why the mobile app becomes handy is because, and I agree with you that a mobile app is something that they probably should think at least longer term. But like once you go through all the effort that you just described, as far as being able to configure a mission or a plan of attack through the web, through a web browser interface, a mobile app would provide the ability to do push notifications.
Even just to be able to message from the game.
Yes. You need to be able to reach out into the real world and grab people, when they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs, let them know that something's going on. And that's what a mobile app would do with the notification.
If I'm somewhere and I punch out, right, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, it should automatically trigger an alert. And you can subscribe or not subscribe to it. You could be like, I'm on call, I'm not on call.
Yeah.
Just like you do with your phone. You go to sleep, you say
Yeah.
sleep mode. But if I'm sitting there watching Grey's Anatomy or whatever, and Andy, you punch out of your reclaimer, I'm like, BRB, I'm gotta go.
Yes.
My buddy is stranded, right?
Yeah.
And I could say answer, and I'll be there in however many minutes. So again, being inside and outside of the game is horrible because it's going to ruin people's marriages and it's going to wreck people's lives, but it's actually necessary and it's a normal part of an MMO, right?
It's a good way to take advantage of modern infrastructure that wasn't necessarily around before, because you now have another tool to be able to foment that player engagement. To me, that part of reaching out and grabbing people who are not currently in the game, that's the biggest piece that I have yet to see other MMOs really take advantage of. And understandably, they're very focused on developing the technology, the graphics engines, the latest cool ships and all that. But for a long-term success of a game like this, you need those tools to be able to make sure that you foster that player engagement long-term.
And to that point, as far as like punching out when there's something important, one of the things my org does, because we've been primarily a mining org, and this it slowed down in the last year or so, and I think really since like 3.18. But when people would go out and they'd be mining and they found a rock they couldn't break on their own, we've got a role in a channel people can go mention and it'll ping you through Discord. But like that's a separate system. But then you could bring somebody in to come help you break that rock, or maybe you were just out in doing a joyride and you found something that looked like it was going to be valuable. So those type of things. It would be great to have it integrated within the game system itself, and allow people to not have to have those. That setup we did as like org leaders to make that happen. But if it's something within game, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is something I would want to say to you, Red Monster. Though you were mentioning that you guys are a mining guild, which is great. Typically, though, in a lot of the other MMOs, when you're out mining, you're gathering those resources for a purpose. And I can't help but wonder if understandably, the game's in development. We know that, so I don't mean to, overlook the obvious here. But if you get to a point where you now have a reason for mining that ore, you need the resource to build a player base, that kind of thing. That is what I mean by player-generated content, and it gives somebody a longer-term loop to want to stay engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's all profit right now. That's all we're going for, and there's no real purpose, which is why
Cha-ching.
It's a huge shame, because there's other base building games.
Cha-ching.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's money, cha-ching. Yeah,
yeah, money. I thought you
You guys
said
are going to be the Iron Bank soon.
but no,
That too.
That's why base building has been kind of so such an alluring aspect of the next 12 months of development or whatever. That if we finally have a reason to go mine all of that iron, it's going to be a resource I actually might pay attention to, rather than just okay, it's taking up extra space and might cover gas.
Yeah.
I'll jump in and say I think one of the big things that CAG needs to do is this twofold. Number one is they need to have a meaningful way of transporting your character to another location without being in the game. I don't care if it's like an app where you can just say, move my character and my stuff from point A to point B while I'm at work and I'm doing other things.
I got it, Paul, on the list.
Yeah.
Or Uber.
Yeah.
Literally an app, just like Uber. You say, I am here and I need to go there. And how much is it going to cost? And one of your org mates comes, picks up your tune,
Yeah.
AI, it doesn't even have to be you, transports you somewhere. And then you're like, well, what happens if the person gets nuked on the way and all that other stuff? Well, I guess the guy's got a shitty rating if he blows you up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I mean, you can, like, that still requires like some sort of gameplay edition where like you.
Oh my God, there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much back end just for that stupid idea.
But I mean, the idea of just having the ability to just move your character from point A to point B as the systems get bigger, as some sort of public transportation that you can access when you're not in the game, so that it will take you time and it'll cost you money. And when you come back into the game, you might have a screen that says, you know, maybe you take the public transportation and you come back in the game, you get off work early, and you're like, oh great, I can go play, and you forgot that you moved your characters. It's like you're going to be moving the character for another 2 hours.
Again,
it's just like
simple quality of life. You're preaching to the choir, man. This is the stuff.
But that sort of thing would help out tremendously, because it allows for players to plan, but also to coordinate with friends. And it's something that's going to be a problem down the line, because you want to play with your buddy who just got the game, and you're off in Nix because you're, you know, elbows deep in a smuggling run trying to make some money, and you're like, okay, I'll just finish this up and go get my friend. And your friend is way back in Crusader 2 jumps away. It's like, great, it's going to take me.
That's going to be a total buzzkill if they don't find a solution for that.
Yeah.
Imagine having to get off of work early to rush home, beat traffic, because you know that there's an org meet at 8:00.
Yeah.
And you got to move all your shit together for 4 hours. You know what I mean? Like this is not quality gameplay.
No, and I love Arma. Don't get me wrong. I fucks with some Arma gameplay. All right, when it comes to like big group gameplay and they get together and they have to have logistics and all kind of stuff. But Arma has an operation that's run by a group, and they usually have a goal. So it's like you show up, and yeah, you might run around for like an hour while everything's getting set up, but once it gets going, it's going. Versus Star Citizen is going to be the kind of game where to gather people up is going to take days in some cases, because of the distances that are going to have to be traveled and the stuff that has to be put together. And that's fun, especially for people like me who are stupid. But, you know, like that's the, like box moving gameplay is a gameplay, the thing I enjoy, but like, it also still needs to remove some friction from people who just want to play the game.
So, we're talking about you know, kind of making the logistics side of the game easier, and you know, we talk about it being a simulation. Now, CIG spent a lot of time removing our option to just like backspace all the time.
Yeah,
right, and you know, kind of making that be a respawn thing. But yeah, are we circumventing the gameplay they're trying to create for us by kind of outsourcing it to a web app? You know,
I don't think so.
That's a legitimate thing, though. Part of you want to make sure you don't create something that allows people to skip out of the game. You want to encourage player engagement. And so whatever you develop for a mechanic, you have to kind of balance that aspect of it. You know, you don't want to have it so that they're running the entire game from an Excel spreadsheet offline. As an extreme example.
That's an extreme example. But you know, I don't know what people's opinions of the movie were, but like there's the Adam Sandler movie Click, where he just like fast forwards to the part that he's bored with. Yeah. Right. And you know, is that cheapening the experience a little bit?
So let me put this out, because I think you were mentioning this earlier, Paul, the whole idea of agent smithing.
Yeah. So
one of this is a problem that's come up a lot in discussions, and since this is all player orgs, you know, content that we're talking about here, when you have these big multiplayer ships, the idea of gathering all of your tunes together to be on that ship so you can all go somewhere on a mission, that sounds daunting. You know, it's hard enough just trying to meet up in one place, but then to meet up in one place on a ship and then go somewhere, it sounds unbearable in the current state of the game with the current mechanics that we have. There's been, you know, sort of 2 ideas proposed on how to tackle that. And again, this still is in vein of the player org stuff. One of them is to have each player have the ability to have multiple character slots. So I've got one character that I play, and he's in my one-man ship somewhere in Stanton. But then I have another character slot who's on an Idris that's somewhere in Pyro. And whenever the org wants to play together, all we have to do is log in under that. The other aspect of that, people have suggested this idea of agent smithing. so that if I'm the owner of the address, I can have a bunch of NPCs that are on the ship, and then make it so that if I want to have real players play with me, they can Agent Smith into one of the AI and temporarily take that position and play with me. There are arguments against either of those that some players have put forth, and I don't know, it'd be worth it to kind of talk about the pros and cons of that a little bit. But they're going to have to tackle that. That is a huge thing, because friction into getting into a fun scenario of gameplay in a huge universe like Star Citizen is going to be a huge detriment. You have to figure out how to tackle that.
Right now, it's the 1 hour rule of Star Citizen. If you want to get in and do something as an org, you have about usually at least an hour of setup. And when we start adding multiple systems and 1,000 player servers where you're gonna have people that are just trolling you like that, I think that's gonna go exponentially higher.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like, yeah, there's definitely some other things. Someone's saying like SimPod stuff you could do. Yeah, that makes sense. But I think one of the things, the argument I would make for agent smithing is, as long as you could make it, there's a similar situation with another game that I'll mention that CIG has taken heavily inspiration from, which is not an MMO, but it's its own sort of kind of. You can see why CIG's taken inspiration from it, which is Tarkov. Escape from Tarkov has a system which is basically a scav system where you can go in and be something that you don't have to risk your gear. You can do other things. You can still get benefits from it, but you're not risking everything you've built up for. It's less of a problem, but you're kind of dealing with a randomization. You don't necessarily are going to get the best of the best stuff. And that sort of idea of having sort of playing an NPC, as it were, could work well within the Star Citizen universe. Both, you can work lore-wise, or you can do it as a way of, as a means of getting hey, my friend is in Pyro. They have a shipment they need to make, and they need somebody who's an engineer and a gunner. I am stuck in Stanton, and it's going to take me too long to get there. But they're at a station where I can just spawn an NPC that I can take over. I don't get any reputation for it. I might even hurt my reputation for my friend if I do something stupid. I don't get any money for it, but I can help a friend and play with them while they're there for like a limited time of some cases.
You can do that with multiple characters anyways, though, Paul.
You could.
You can set your 10 different tunes all over the place in different beds everywhere. And like if I really need to get into Pyro and I know it's going to take me 45 minutes to get you, then I'll just launch in Pyro. Fire 1337, 8, 9, or 10. Just choose a different character.
Yeah, but I mean, those characters would still need to have maintenance and rep and all that kind of stuff, and that could also lead to trolling.
But we'll give you an excuse to play 10 different characters to level them all up so that they're all useful.
I mean, surely there's got to be examples to draw from other MMOs that have multiple character slots.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some solutions to the problem. But I think the end goal should be always that make it easier for people to play with friends in a more immediate solution that won't give them an undue advantage that doesn't benefit them overall in a way that it would be if you just had friends who were physically next to each other.
It's got to be fair.
Yeah, it's got to be fair, and it's got to be anything can be like milked, and like the thing that like newbie, what you just said, that's going to happen anyways. People are going to do that anyways. People are going to have 10 different accounts and place them all over the place and just do that because they can, and which is fine. I mean, CIG makes the money. they cash the checks. It's still like several $100s because that's $45 per package, and it'll be more down the line. But there needs to be a means to make it easier in the short term with Pyro coming out and 1,000 players. And I think that's the main thing I would be focusing on is making it either easier for people to transport themselves to a location or be able to drop in and drop out without a huge hit to without a huge benefit for the person who's doing that. So,
sorry, just an aside of that. Other people were saying I want a multi-bot, have 2 different characters running at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then CIG took it away because you can only use one of your characters in your account like if you had 10 slots or whatever. And the guys are like, well, that's easy. We'll just make another completely different account. And again, there's really no way to control that other than IP banning, like I posted in chat. But then maybe Andy has his brother out and they're both in the same house. And now what? They're going to use easy anti-cheat to deduce that it's legit. It's not trackable. It's not something that they, you'd have to get CIG Jake in there, like shadowing your screen to determine if you were like a real person or not, or some BS. It's not policeable, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's definitely something that, like I said, needs to remove friction. Organization stuff, I think, is key. I actually agree with when you talk about org hangers. And I think the easy thing to balance,
that would be awesome.
I think the easy thing to balance for org hangers is, okay, we're going to set the org hanger at arc L1. It's there. Now, if you want to get stuff, we just have you have two options. You have your cargo deck, your cargo container, and the org's cargo elevator. And it's like, we got a bunch of stuff in the org cargo elevator. So you just call up the org cargo elevator and then pull it out. You swap it out and you put it back in and send it back down. And if you try to access the org cargo elevator while somebody else is trying to access the org cargo elevator, but if then whoever got it first gets there and it just says wait until such and such is finished, and then you wait for them to go and do it and stuff.
This is even better. Sorry to cut you off, Paul, but like the whole point of having org money is that the org would not be able to have an org hanger until they paid for it. So the community would need to generate enough funds so that they could have it. And if they wanted to have one in Pyro and then one in Stanton, because it gives them more capability, then so be it. And it's not going to replace the personal hangers because you still want those, for your stuff. But I can actually see many people only operating out of an org hanger if it was large enough, if it had enough platforms, etc.
Yeah. But I agree. I think like guild halls are a thing, and guild halls are great. And I think building bases could be a thing, but not everyone's going to have the desire to build and maintain a base.
Thing I want to do.
Well, and that's a good segue because I think we're talking about what those features are going to look like for an org base. Those base building features that we're talking about. A shared hangar like that. I think it's a fantastic idea, but somebody does bring up, would that scale with 1,000 players in an org, right? How many people would be accessing it at the same time? And does it need to be a shared space, or could it just be everyone at this location has access to it through their own hangar? But
that's super messy for sure. Like we're just shooting out stupid ideas that are causing more problems than the suggestion is worth, right? But it's the whole point.
The idea is more. There needs to be more focus on making it I keep saying this word, but removing the friction of players being able to get towards one another. And whether that be organizations or party mechanics, there needs to be less. It needs to be less of a chore, at least to just play with one another. Maybe not necessarily earn money with one another, but there definitely needs to be some elements there to make it. I think someone mentioned WoW had summons, and there's definitely other things out there that you could use to quickly bring someone to you in a way that wouldn't break the game, but would still allow for that sort of gameplay stuff. So
the good news is I think CIG knows about reducing that friction part, because they've already identified that the whole HAB respawn loop is a detriment to people getting on quickly.
Yeah. And they're also doing things like they want to make sure you preserve your position when you log out. With 4.0 and beyond, they want to be able so that when you log out of the game and you come back, you're exactly where you left off, rather than being jumping back to wherever you were last time. I think we had a good discussion about this. We're going to move on to the question and answer session. Thank you to Noobifier and Red Monster and Radar Ranger for showing up and hanging out in the discussion. We'll be right back with the question and answer session. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, thank you for watching. You'll find the full VOD in the comments below. Well, it'll be both of the VODs because we had a weird disconnect in the middle. But I'll also have the Q&A section uploaded separately, and it'll be down below. And of course, when I do release it, it'll be above Noobifier's head. You can click that link, and that will be that link will take you. That'll be up there after I've released that Q&A section, because the way YouTube works, it doesn't like it when you jump a bunch of videos out. So I'll probably be a couple of days Usually I release it on like Tuesday or Wednesday, and I release this episode on Sunday or Monday. So it's usually out. No, is it Monday or Sunday? Sunday usually. Yeah, I usually release it on Sunday. So usually the 24 hours after the main episode, after the live stream, it goes up the main episode, and then a couple days after that, I drop the Q&A. So make sure you check those out. If you enjoyed this, make sure you check out Noobifier's YouTube channel. Check out my Radar app, and of course, check out Red Monster SC on Twitch and YouTube, or just Twitch.
Yeah, Twitch and YouTube.
YouTube. Awesome. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for watching. And you can join us live at twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, youtube.com/TheAstroPubLive. Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Would love to have you come on and join the chat and join the discussions yourselves. But till then, like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.